For centuries, the Bible has been held up as the ultimate source of truth, wisdom, and moral guidance. But when you dig a little deeper, you start to notice something strange. Many of its stories and teachings don't line up. From conflicting commandments to contradictory timelines, the Bible often can't seem to keep its own story straight. Due to many requests in the comments after yesterday's video, here is part 2 of the series where we break down more insane Bible contradictions, exposing the flaws that believers like to ignore and skeptics love to point out. No sugarcoating, no apologetics, just a blunt look at the inconsistencies that raise serious questions about this so-called holy book. Ready to question everything you've been told? Let's get started. Number 1 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible is something you'd think would be crystal clear: the 10 Commandments. After all, these are supposed to be the cornerstone of biblical law, the big list God gave Moses directly. But here's the twist. There are actually 2 different versions of the 10 Commandments, and they don't match. The first and most famous version comes from Exodus 20, where God speaks directly to the Israelites from Mount Sinai. These are the commandments everyone knows: no other gods, no idols, don't misuse God's name, honor the Sabbath, and so on. Moses later writes them on stone tablets. But then, things take a weird turn in Exodus 34. After Moses smashes the original tablets in anger over the golden calf incident, God tells him to carve a new set of tablets. But this time, the list of commandments is completely different. Instead of don't steal or don't commit adultery, we get laws about observing festivals, sacrificing firstborn animals, and not boiling a young goat in its mother's milk. The kicker? Exodus 34:28 explicitly says, "And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments." That's right, according to this passage, the goat boiling rule is part of the real 10 Commandments. So which one is it? Is it the list in Exodus 20, which everyone recognizes as the 10 Commandments? Or is it the bizarre rules in Exodus 34, which the Bible literally calls the 10 Commandments? Apologists try to explain this away by claiming the commandments in Exodus 34 were a different set of covenant laws, but that's not what the text says. The Bible plainly refers to the second set as the 10 Commandments. This contradiction isn't just embarrassing, it completely undermines the idea that the 10 Commandments are a single, divinely revealed moral code. If God couldn't even stick to one version of his most important laws, how are we supposed to take the rest of the Bible seriously? At the end of the day, we're left with 2 different lists, one famous and one obscure. So next time someone tells you to follow the 10 Commandments, you might want to ask, which ones? Number 2 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible is another numerical discrepancy involving King David. This time about how many charioteers he captured during a military campaign. You'd expect a historical account to get something as basic as numbers right. But once again, the Bible can't seem to agree. In 2 Samuel 8:4, it says, David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. That's a lot of men. 7,000 charioteers sounds like a solid victory. But then, flip over to 1 Chronicles 18:4, and we read something completely different. David captured 1,000 chariots, 7,000 horses, and 20,000 foot soldiers. Wait, now it's 1,700 charioteers, not 7,000? This is a huge discrepancy. Are we talking about a small group of elite captives or a massive army? These numbers aren't even close. Apologists often claim that scribal errors could explain the difference. But if we're supposed to believe the Bible is divinely inspired, wouldn't an omniscient God prevent such glaring mistakes? After all, if the Bible can't even keep its numbers straight, what else did it get wrong? It's worth noting that the chronicler, writing long after the events described, was known to exaggerate numbers to make Israel's victories seem more impressive. So, it's entirely possible that the author of 1 Chronicles inflated the figures to enhance David's reputation. Regardless of why this happened, the fact remains, the Bible contains conflicting accounts of a supposedly historical event. If the Bible can't agree on something as straightforward as a military statistic, how can anyone trust it to deliver absolute truth? Whether it was 1,700 charioteers or 7,000, this contradiction leaves us with one undeniable conclusion. Biblical accuracy isn't as rock-solid as believers like to claim. Number 3 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible deals with one of the most important promises Jesus supposedly made, the timing of the end of the world. If you've ever wondered why, after 2,000 years, the apocalypse still hasn't happened, this contradiction might have something to do with it. In Matthew 24:34, Jesus is crystal clear. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. He's referring to the end times, the wars, famines, earthquakes, and the return of the Son of Man in glory. The implication is obvious. Jesus expected the end to occur during the lifetime of his listeners. But here's the problem. That generation passed away a long time ago and we're all still here. No apocalyptic return, no final judgment. Cue 2 Peter 3:8-10, written much later, and the tone suddenly shifts. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The day of the Lord will come like a thief. Now the story is different. It's not happening soon, it's happening eventually, whenever God feels like it. These two passages completely contradict each other. Matthew sets a clear deadline, within a generation. But when that didn't happen, the author of 2 Peter conveniently moves the goalposts, turning soon into an indefinite someday. Apologists will argue that generation in Matthew means something symbolic or spiritual, but that's a weak dodge. The plain reading is obvious. Jesus was talking about his contemporaries. And when the end didn't come, later writers had to scramble to reinterpret the timeline, turning a failed prophecy into a vague, distant event. This isn't just a minor inconsistency, it's a massive credibility problem. If Jesus promised something as monumental as the end of the world within a specific time frame and it didn't happen, what else might the Bible be wrong about? In the end, whether you're waiting for a thief in the night or wondering what Jesus meant by this generation, one thing's clear. The Bible can't seem to get its apocalyptic story straight. Number 4 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible tackles one of the most debated topics in Christian theology. How does someone achieve salvation? Through faith alone, or by both faith and works? You'd think the Bible would have a consistent answer on something as fundamental as how to avoid eternal damnation, but instead, we get two completely conflicting doctrines. In Romans chapter 3, verse 28, Paul makes his position crystal clear. For we maintain that a person is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. Paul's message tells us that faith alone is enough for salvation. You can't earn your way into heaven by doing good deeds. This became the cornerstone of Protestant theology during the Reformation, sola fide or faith alone. But flip to James chapter 2, verse 24, and you get a completely different take. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. James couldn't be more explicit. Faith by itself isn't enough. If your faith doesn't lead to good deeds, it's useless. He even drives the point home earlier in James chapter 2 verse 17, saying, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. So which is it? Are we saved by faith alone, as Paul insists? Or is it by a combination of faith and works, as James argues? These two teachings are fundamentally opposed, and no amount of theological gymnastics can reconcile them. Apologists try to claim they're saying the same thing in different ways, but that's not what the text says. Paul outright dismisses works, while James emphasizes them as essential. This contradiction isn't just a theoretical debate, it's shaped the entire history of Christianity, leading to major divisions between different denominations. Protestants side with Paul, preaching salvation by faith alone, while Catholics side with James, teaching that faith must be accompanied by good works. But if both letters are supposedly inspired by the same God, why do they give completely different answers to the most important question of all? How do you get saved? Whether you believe in faith alone or faith plus works, one thing's certain: if God was trying to deliver a clear message about salvation, he failed miserably. And if the Bible can't even get this right, it leaves you wondering, what else did it mess up? Number 5 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible is a classic example of a story that can't keep its own details straight. Paul's dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus. It's one of the most famous events in Christian history. Paul, formerly a persecutor of Christians, sees a blinding light, hears Jesus' voice, and becomes one of the most influential apostles. But if you pay attention to the details in Acts, you'll notice a glaring inconsistency. In Acts chapter 9, verse 7, during the first telling of the story, it says, "The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound but did not see anyone." So according to this account, Paul's companions heard the voice, but they didn't see anything. Now jump to Acts chapter 22, verse 9, where Paul himself recounts the event. "My companions saw the light, but they did not understand the voice of him who was speaking to me." Wait, what? Now they saw the light but didn't hear the voice? That's a direct contradiction. In one version, they hear the voice but don't see anything. In the other, they see the light but don't hear the voice. Apologists try to explain this away by claiming the companions heard a sound but didn't understand it as words. But that's not what the text says. In Acts chapter 9, it's clear they heard the voice, while in Acts chapter 22, Paul explicitly says they didn't. These aren't two complementary perspectives. They're conflicting accounts of the same event. This contradiction is significant because Paul's conversion is a cornerstone of Christian theology. It's the moment when the greatest enemy of early Christianity becomes its most ardent defender. If the Bible can't even get the basic facts of this pivotal story straight, it raises serious doubts about the reliability of the rest of its narrative. So did Paul's companions hear the voice or see the light? According to Acts, they did both, or neither depending on which chapter you read. Once again, the Bible leaves us with more questions than answers. Number 6 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible involves the legendary strongman Samson and his kill count. Samson is famous for his superhuman strength, his long hair, and his brutal battles against the Philistines. But when it comes to exactly how many people he killed, the Bible can't seem to agree. In Judges chapter 15 verse 15, we get the iconic story where Samson picks up a jawbone of a donkey and uses it to slaughter 1,000 men in a single battle. The verse is pretty clear. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Impressive, right? A one-man army taking out 1,000 soldiers with nothing but a bone. But things get murkier in Judges chapter 16 verse 30 during Samson's final act. After being captured, blinded, and humiliated by the Philistines, Samson prays to God for strength one last time. He pulls down the pillars of a temple, killing himself and everyone inside. The text says, "Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived." Here's the problem. If Samson already killed 1,000 men with the jawbone, and the Bible claims he killed more in his final act, we're left wondering, how many more? Are we talking another 1,000? 10,000? The text gives no exact number, but it clearly implies a larger kill count than before. Yet the earlier account of 1,000 men with a donkey's jawbone was presented as his most impressive feat up to that point. Apologists try to hand-wave this contradiction by arguing that the Bible isn't interested in precise numbers here. It's more about telling a dramatic story. But if that's the case, why give exact numbers like 1,000 in the first place? Either the Bible is a reliable historical record, or it's a collection of exaggerated tales meant to awe and inspire. This contradiction highlights a bigger issue with biblical narratives. They often prioritize storytelling over factual consistency. Whether Samson killed 1,000 or many more, what's clear is that the Bible's account of his exploits doesn't add up. And if it can't even keep track of its hero's kill count, how much faith should we put in its more important claims? So, was it 1,000 men or was it many more? Once again, the Bible leaves us guessing. Number 8 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible highlights a pair of back-to-back verses in the book of Proverbs that give completely opposite advice on how to handle a fool. It's a classic case of biblical whiplash. One verse says one thing and the very next verse says the exact opposite. First, in Proverbs chapter 26 verse 4 it says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him." Seems clear enough. Don't engage with fools, or you'll end up looking just as foolish. Solid advice, right? But then immediately after, in Proverbs chapter 26 verse 5 it says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes." Wait, now we're being told to answer the fool or else he'll think he's smart. So which is it? Should we answer the fool or not answer the fool? Apologists love to claim that these verses provide situational wisdom, that whether or not to answer a fool depends on the context. But that's not what the text says. These aren't presented as nuanced guidelines. They're two flat-out contradictory commands sitting side by side. It's like being told, "Don't touch the stove or you'll get burned," followed by, "Touch the stove or you'll never learn." Which one are you supposed to follow? This contradiction exposes a larger problem with biblical wisdom literature. It often presents conflicting advice without offering any clear way to reconcile the differences. If the Bible is supposed to be a reliable guide to living a righteous life, it shouldn't leave readers scratching their heads, wondering which command they're supposed to follow. So should you ignore the fool or should you call him out? The Bible gives two answers, but only one thing is certain: you can't do both. And once again, we're left with a contradiction that calls into question the consistency and reliability of the so-called wisdom in the Bible. Number 9 on our list of top contradictions in the Bible deals with the question of whether God can be tempted or if he tempts others. Spoiler alert. The Bible can't seem to make up its mind. In James chapter 1 verse 13, it's stated plainly, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me.' For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone." This verse makes it clear, God is beyond temptation and he doesn't go around tempting people to sin. Simple, right? But turn back to Genesis chapter 22 verse 1 and we see something completely different. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." Then God said, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering." Here God directly tempts, or tests, Abraham by asking him to sacrifice his son. That sure sounds like God tempting someone to do something pretty extreme. And it's not just Abraham. Throughout the Old Testament, God repeatedly tests or tempts people, from Job to the Israelites wandering in the desert. So how does this fit with the claim in James that God doesn't tempt anyone? Apologists argue that there's a difference between tempting someone to sin and testing their faith. But that's splitting hairs. Whether you call it a test or a temptation, God is clearly putting people in difficult situations to see how they'll react, which is exactly what James says God doesn't do. This contradiction isn't just about semantics, it's about the nature of God. Is he a being who never tempts anyone, as James claims? Or is he the kind of deity who tests his followers with impossible choices, as seen throughout the Old Testament? At the end of the day, you can't have it both ways. Either God tempts and tests people, or he doesn't. And since the Bible gives us two contradictory answers, it leaves us once again with more questions than clarity. If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.